Hi, my name is Walter Nahara, and I am a student at California State University, Los Angeles. And these are my notes for week 3 of CS 4540. Now, in the previous 2 weeks, we were talking a lot about neural networks. And in our example, it's the neural network that we've been discussing is a program capable of identifying handwritten digits. It has an input layer of 184 neurons, which represents the pixel values of the image, two hidden layers with 16 neurons each, and an output layer with 10 neurons, which represents the network's choice of digit on the right, so 0 through 9. We also discussed gradient descent, which aka learning, which refers to finding the weights and biases that minimize the cost function. uh, Cost for a single training example is computable by determining the sum of the squares of the difference between the actual output and the desired output. The magnitude of each component of the gradient determining how sensitive the cost function is to each corresponding weight and biases along with alterations of the two. Now, what we're going to be discussing is backpropagation. Backpropagation is a machine learning technique that trains artificial neural networks by calculating how to update their parameters. Our current neural networks neurons are activated randomly with no clear patterns. Thus, we we will have to change the activation values for the network to properly identify the given digits, aka we're nudging the weight and biases in order to improve the output. Sizes of these nudges should be proportional to how far off each output value is from the target. So that neurons that are way off require big nudges. Meanwhile, neurons that are close to correct require little nudges. There are three values that can team up together to increase activation. They include increased biases, increased weights, and change activations from the previous layer. When it comes to change biases, they are by far the simplest way to change its activation because unlike the other methods, the effect of a change to the bias on the weighted sum is constant and predictable. Changing weights, since weights within the vector have differing levels of influence, where weights associated with large activation values have a stronger effect than weights associated with small activation values. We can sum up this in a phrase most bang for your buck, which is just adjusting the weights in proportion to their associated activations. Now, chasing activation requires altering all activations of the previous layer, where everything connected to a particular neuron with a positive weight is brighter, and everything connected with a negative weight is dimmer. Adjusting the activation is proportional to their associated weight. So you can kind of see how when it comes to changing weights and changing activation, they correlate with one another. Furthermore, we have to take into consideration that we can't influence the activation of the previous layer directly, but instead adjust their respective weights and biases that determine their value. Now, how can we apply this to our neural network? Let's take, for example, a neuron that takes di that represent digits 8. Biases associated with the digit 8 neuron should be increased, whereas other biases not associated should be decreased. This allows for more accurate prediction with a lower cost. Hibbean theory is uh, it's a theory that was presented during the lecture, aka the videos by Three Blue One Brown. And it essentially refers to when two neurons are repeatedly activated together and connections between them strengthens. So, aka neurons that fire together, wire together. Now, it's not directly similar to neural network, but it but the principles are basically the same. In that neurons that fire while seeing an eight get more strongly linked to those firing while thinking about N8. Uh, Digit 8 neurons would be more active as everything connected to that neuron with a positive weight become brighter, every other neuron with a negative weight becomes dimmer. Now we have to take into consideration that our example focuses on one digit 8 output neuron, but there are other neurons in the last layer with their own influence and desired output that are beyond what the digit 8 neuron desires from them. So as you can see on the right, we've been mainly focusing on the neuron that represents the eighth digit. There are nine other neurons that represent the other single digits. As such, we have to add together not only the desires of the digit 8 neurons, but also the desires of the other nine neurons, which each has their own influence and suggested nudges for the second to last layer, which which provides us with a list of nudges you that we want to happen to the second to last layer. We can recursively apply the same process to the relevant weights and biases, repeating this process as we move backwards through the network. Um, we have something called a stuff a stochastic gradient descent. It's an optimization algorithm used in machine learning where instead of calculating the gradient based on the entire data set at once, it randomly select a single data point or a small subset or aka mini batch to compute the gradient and update the model parameters. And while this gradient descent is approximately, meaning that which means that it's not as accurate as a gradient descent, but the benefit is that it's much faster to compute. Now, another thing that we briefly touched on during the lecture is large language models or LLMs. Language models are sophisticated mathematical function that predicts what words come next for any piece of text. And they're largely used in chatbots. Chatbots are essentially an interaction between a user and a hypothetical AI assistant, where whatever the user types in as the first part of the interaction, and then the model repeatedly predict the next word to create a hypothetical response to present to the user. Models learn how to make these predictions by processing an enormous amount of text, typically pulled from the internet. Language model behavior entirely depends on the many different continuous values or weights, with any alteration to their weights resulting in changes to the probabilities that the model gives for the next word on a given input. Large language models has hundreds of billions of different parameters, which aren't deliberately set by humans, meaning set models begin at random, outputting gibberish until they are refined through many examples of pieces of text. Now, when it comes to LLMs training examples for large language models range from a handful of words to thousands of words, with each training case passing through all the words except for the last word, where the predictions produced by the model are compared with the true last word from the example. Backpropagation is utilized to tweak all the weights in such a way that it makes the model a little more likely to choose the true last words and a little less likely to choose all the others. Chatbots undergo another type of training in order to accomplish its secondary goal of being a good AI assistant, called reinforcement learning with human feedback. Workers flag unhelpful or problematic predictions, and their corrections further change the model's parameters, making them more likely to give predictions that users prefer. Now, we also briefly discussed about transformers. They're essentially a model developed by a team of researchers at Google that soak in all the text at once in parallel. Prior to 2017, language models would process text one at a time and read the text from start to finish. Transformers associate each word with a long list of numbers due to that training process only working with continuous values, requiring to somehow encode language using numbers. And each of these lists of numbers may somehow encode the meaning of the corresponding word. Transformers are unique due to their reliance on a special operation known as attention, an operation that gives all these lists of numbers a chance to talk to one another and refine the meanings they encode based on the text around, all done in parallel. Transformers also include a secondary type of operation known as a feed-forward neural network. It gives the model extra capacity to store more patterns about language learned during training. Now, this is only a brief explanation of transformers, which we would further discuss next week, as that will be our main focus of the lecture on for that particular week. And these are the videos that were used during the lecture, both produced by 3Blue 1 Brown. And this is the end of the video. So thanks for watching.